안녕하세요. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today, especially our colleagues in UP because there is some deadline to grade submission. So after this lecture, you can just go back to check your papers. But we really appreciate all of you coming today. And to just formally open today's forum and lecture, we will just have Dr. Jean Encinas Franco from UP Department of Political Science just to greet everyone formally.
Hello, 안녕하세요. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy that you're all here. I know it's Czech Republic. We call it the Czech Republic because we're checking the deadline of grade submission is tonight at 11:59 online, and we're happy to welcome Dr. Dohye Kim for this very exciting. I'm pretty sure presentation today. We would like to know more about Korean youth migrants in the Philippines. So we have familiar faces. So si Monica, our OICA director, and of course the guru of us all, Dr. Marla Asi, si Mike Atienza, who happens to be friends with Dr. Kim, my advisee, and she is studying Philippine schools overseas in the Middle East, Jeman Malipiran, and of course our my colleague, the Palma coordinator, Matthew Miranda, who else? So yeah, and Michelle Palumbari of CIFAL, of course. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. So we will just start the lecture proper, and we will just have Dr. Dohye Kim, who really flew from Korea. So let us hear from Dr. Kim.
Magandang umaga po. Well, I almost forgot every Tagalog, fortunately, but I still remember some words like sige for survivor. So first of all, I do appreciate UP Korea Center for inviting me to this wonderful talk, and particularly Professor Kyung-min Bae for arranging today's talk. So because my dissertation topic was about Korean migrants in the Philippines, so I stayed in Manila, Cebu, Baguio, and Angeles between 2015 and 2016 for more than a year and a half, and I finished my dissertation. It wasn't good though. Anyway, well, the best thing is the finished thing, right? So, so this might be an excuse, but after the graduation, I really tried to come back here again. But COVID-19 and my job situation cut me not to come. So it took me like 7 years to come back here again. So it's so touching to me, for me. So now I'm so grateful to be here again, to see the familiar faces and lovely smiles and enjoying this weather.
Yeah.
And well, the traffic wasn't that pleasant though, but today was fine, right? So today's talk is about my current research project, that is Korean youth migrants in choosing to stay in the Philippines, particularly by studying in the Philippine universities. So before getting into the topic, um, 이거 움직이지 않는 거 혹시? 네, 움직였어. 이걸로 해. 네. Right. Korean youth migrants who studied in the Philippine university. So before getting the details of this research project, let me briefly explain what brought me to this topic. Right. What brought me to this topic? So as I mentioned, my dissertation topic was about Korean migrants, specifically Korean middle-aged businessmen in the Philippines. Right, and based on my ethnographic data, I published several articles like this one and this one, and I will just briefly summarize the most recent articles. So this article highlights how Korean business masculinity, prioritizing challenging spirit and pioneering new market as signs of manliness, push those Korean middle-aged men to find the Philippines as a like haven to make incomes. But this is the important part. But how, unfortunately, their attempt to recover their manliness in the Philippines failed. So that was the main argument. So while I was not able to cross the Philippine border again, I need to find another research topic, So I found another research topic that is very interesting to me. That was the international students in South Korean universities, because the number of international students are rapidly increasing. So that there are not so many Philippine university students in Korea, but there are many Chinese, Mongolian, and Vietnamese students in South Korea right now. So that's why I changed it. I shifted my topic to Mongolian and Vietnamese students in Korean university, and I studied, I published several articles. Then I realized, okay, there were quite many Korean international students in Philippine university too, but why they were not highlighted yet that much? So I thought about these issues, that it was because, as you might know, most of studies on international students and study abroad were conducted in the context of the Western countries, particularly so-called prestigious university in the United States and United Kingdom, and those, North American or West European countries. So there were some studies on Korean students in Asian countries like Philippines and Singapore, but they tended to spotlight those in elementary and middle school students. So not the university students, because the Korean parents eager to teach spoken English to their children as early as possible, because spoken English could be one of very important assets for Koreans to get into the prestigious universities and to get a good job and to get be promoted. So that's why we call it English fever in Korea. So since mid-2000s, a number of Korean students in early age rushed to the English-spoken countries, including the Philippines, for studying, and scholars call them early study abroad students. But not surprisingly, most of studies on Korean early study abroad students focused on those in heading to the United States, by highlighting the new family structure, such as goose family, 기러기 가족 in Korean, as you might know. So meaning a mother and children moving to the United States for English study, while a father remained in Korea for making money. So there were very small, a few studies on children and family members choosing to Philippines, but interestingly, they tended to identify those Korean students as short-term stayers. by understanding that the Korean students and families would re-migrate to another English-speaking countries like the United States or return to Korea after spending like 6 months or a year or 2 years, which means like short-term stayers. So in other words, the Korean students and their families in the Philippines were not only less highlighted, but also they were not considered as long-term migrants at all. However, while I stayed in 2015 and 2016 in the Philippines for my fieldwork, I noticed that there were many Korean people who studied in Philippine University and even who were graduated from the university and stayed here for job or for marriage for many, many years. So the number, for instance, the number of Koreans granted special study permits were increased from 5,000 in 2004 to 28,000 in 2007. Also, based on the Philippine Bureau of Immigration, the number of Koreans who issued and extended 9F visa. 9F visa is visa for the Philippine University, enrollment of Philippine University, was also grown up from 3,000 in 2014 and to almost 15,000 in 2017. So this number ranked the Koreans the second largest populations among the international students in college in the Philippines after India. But the Indian students and Korean students has very different demographic characteristics because, as I told you, most Korean students who enrolled in Philippine universities stayed here like since 5 years old, like since 10 years old, which means they spent at least 10 years before getting into the Philippine university. So that's very different from Indian universities cases. So so if I follow some previous migration literatures and their categorization, I might say that those Korean youth can be 1.5 generation. Why not? So that was my first sort of research questions. So that's how I was interested in this topic of Korean youth in the Philippines. So under this large topic, I found 4 different subtopics. So the first one is why and how Korean students choose to enter the Philippine University. And second, what the generational differences are among Koreans choosing the Philippine universities. Third, how the lives of Korean youth in the Philippines after graduation. And finally, how the lives of Korean youth when returning home, Korea. So I will mostly talk about first to third questions because I didn't even start thinking about the fourth yet. So I will just focus on first to third. Right. So for the first questions, right, why and how Korean students choose to enter the Philippine universities. So I already conducted this research already almost 1.5 years ago in Korea. Because by interviewing Korean young people who are in their 20s and chose to enter the Philippine universities. Well, the research was possible because most of Korean youth came back to Korea at that time because of COVID-19. So I could interview them in Korea. So I was lucky. So I already published this based on the data. I already published an article, but it's in Korean article. So let me briefly summarize in English. So in that study, I argued that the Korean early study abroad students extended their stay in the Philippines by choosing to enter the Philippine university, not simply because of the relatively cheaper tuition fee of the university. That's what Korean public usually think about the reasons, but because of their emotional comfort, meaning they feel like home toward the Philippines. So in this study, I analyzed okay. No. So in that study, it's slow. No, sorry. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So in that study, it just takes time, I think. This is better. Yes. Good. So in that study, right? In that study, I analyzed how the Philippines became home for Korean early study abroad students as the place producing the sense of security, stability, and comfort. So at first, because they spent more than at least 10 years here already, so for those who stayed here with their family members, the Philippines already became their home, of course. But it was very important to note that the Korean youth who stayed in the Philippines by themselves, even they think that the country is home. For instance, Jonghyun, who came to the Philippines as elementary school student and stayed in a small village in Iloilo, resisted his parents' suggestion to enter university in Manila by saying that my parents, who were in Korea at the time, told me to enter the university in Manila because I only resided in the small village in Iloilo. They thought that I should experience a bigger world outside Iloilo. But for me, it sounded too harsh. Housemates in my boarding house were my family at the time. So if I moved to Manila, it was for me to say goodbye to my most intimate family members. I strongly resisted my parents' idea. For the not all, but some of Korean early study abroad students stay in the Philippines without their family members by residing in those Korean boarding house or guest house, bimbak in Korean words. In these cases, fellow Korean youth, 형 or 언니 or oppa, became pseudo family who can share their intimate daily lives more than anyone else in the world. Therefore, like Jonghyun, it became unacceptable option to go to the university outside their hometown in the Philippines. So it was not acceptable option for them to go outside Philippines. It was unimaginable options for them. And furthermore, another reason for the feelings of comfort is class positions. So the class position of Korean youth provided emotional comfort toward this country. So when I say Korean early study abroad students had emotional attachment to the Philippines, it was important to closely analyze what the Philippines means. Was it toward the Philippines as a country? My answer is no. One of my research participants, Sun Young, who was graduated from the Philippine University and returned to Korea for work, described the Philippines that she longed for like this way. So my hometown Philippines is nearby SM Makati. I do not wish to come back to any other place in the Philippines, but the place where I spent most of the time. As you know, landmark Glorieta and Greenbelt were connected, and my high school was located somewhere there. Every day I walked around the malls and ate something with my Korean friends and chatted. I miss those days and those places. So it was not surprising that for Sonyeong, the Philippines was safe and clean place, quite different from Korean public's general understanding about the country. This was because her intimacy toward the Philippines was strongly constituted by her class position that made her enjoy luxurious and safe urban life in Manila. So lastly, Korean students' sense of security was also driven by their confidence to get a job in global companies, right? Global companies located in Manila, as they could take advantage of foreign students. So the research participants said, I know graduating from the Philippine University itself hardly guarantees a merit. But if I add work experience at one of global companies in Manila upon graduation, it could be a special merit for me to move to the next level. So all my research participants studied in the Philippine universities, but they did not plan to live in the Philippines for good. As they needed to move to other countries or return Korea, work experience in global companies became important asset for them to live anywhere in the world. So in this context, the Korean youth believed that staying in the Philippines provided more chance for them to enter the global companies than in Korea. One of participants said like this way. Yeah. Right. As you know, Korea is a very competitive country. Even the students from SKY, which means like three top university in Korea, Seoul National, Korea, and Yonsei University, cannot get a job at the conglomerates. It might be no one in Korea. But here in Philippines, it is relatively easy for me to find chances. I can speak both Korean and English, and I'm from a prestigious university. This is most of my research participants were from Ateneo, UP, RASA, and UST. 1 out of 4. There is no other options there. So that was considered prestigious universities in the Philippines, as you know. So that was how they had a confidence toward their future in this country. But there is another part of this story. Nonetheless, not all students remained happy after entering the university. They chose the Philippines. They chose the Philippine University with their hope to stay in comfortable environment. But as time to leave the country approaches, they became very nervous. As mentioned earlier, most of my research participants did not have planned to settle down in the Philippines, partly because the country did not welcome immigrants that much, and partly because they thought that the infrastructure in the country, such as healthcare, transportation, and other services, were not sufficiently developed. Thus, they plan to leave the country at some point. They don't know when yet, but at some point. So, mostly upon graduation. So, in other words, they postponed their entrance into the competitive environment by choosing to remain in the Philippines, but they cannot put it off forever. Time marches on, and they felt an intense sense of insecurity more and more. One of participants said, I should be mentally ready to leave out any places other than the Philippines. In the Philippines, I feel secured without competition, but at the same time, I feel insecure because they know they have to leave at some point. So the previous literature of international students tended to connect study abroad to the class mobility or class reproduction. For instance, as you know, in her famous research on wealthy Chinese in Hong Kong heading to the United States, Ai Wang emphasized that the wealthy Chinese gained the flexible citizenship moving between Hong Kong and United States by educating their children in the States as part of family strategy for class reproduction. In this tradition of migration studies, emotion and affect were last highlighted as an important factor shaping study abroad. So this case of Korean international students in the Philippines contributed to extend such analytic focus in the studies of international student mobility. So that's the summary of my article, the recent article. So now let's move on to the second and the third research question, what the generational differences are and how the lives of Korean youth in the Philippines after graduation. So while conducting this first research in Korea during the COVID-19, so these two research questions came up to me, and I finally decided to come back to Philippines for fieldwork. So but the thing is that I just started research. I just finished the 3 interviews yesterday with Korean youth. So it's very beginning stage of this research. So I'm so afraid that I might not have the concrete conclusion yet, but I really like to share my research, my ideas and questions, and to have a valuable opinions and questions from the audiences and to refine my research questions. So for the second research question, the generational differences among Koreans choosing the Philippine university. So I found this topic interesting because the Koreans' perception on the Philippines as a destination for study abroad radically changed it a lot, radically changed it during last 50 years. So until the early 1990s, right, until the early 1990s, there were Korean students studied in the Philippine University to mostly obtain their advanced degrees, like master's and doctorate degrees. So it was not difficult to find Korean professors, politicians, and even congressmen who were graduated from Ateneo or UP and climbed up to the prestigious social position in Korea. Yet, since maybe like 2000, right? Maybe 2000s, the Philippines became the country for short-term English education for Korea rather than advanced degree. So in this context, I'm sure that the Korea's experiences in the universities and perception about this country might be very different by generation. So I'm planning to trace Korean students' expectation of and lived experiences in the Philippine University. Then I hope to reveal the processes how Koreans' perceptions on the Philippines has been changed by generation, and more importantly, how such change affected their after-study lives. So the third research question is like the lives of Korean youth in the Philippines after graduation. So I'm very struggling with this research question. So I'm still working on that research question though, but right, as mentioned earlier, many Korean students plan to leave the country after graduation. Some migrated to other countries or some returned to Korea. However, not all of them. Some decided to remain in the Philippines by opening their own shop, taking over their parents' business, and marrying Filipinos. So there were like 1.5 generation, right? And if they had children, their children might be second generation migrants. In the migration literature, focusing on mostly Western countries, tended to study 1.5 and second generation migrants in the context of assimilation and segmented assimilation. So mostly in sociology literature, the scholars discussed how the 1.5 or second generation migrants assimilated into the mainstream society or not, and how different ethnic communities differently assimilated into the United States. So they, frequently they compare the Asian migrants to the Latino migrants. That's what they do for many years. However, there were another literature on migrant youth, mostly outside the Western countries, called third culture kid, TCK, they said. So the TCK denoted people who were raised in a culture other than their parents or the culture of their country of nationality, and live in a different environment during a significant part of their child development years. Well, it sounds like 1.5 or second generation, but in TCK, but TCK usually means those children of expat, and mostly those in privileged migrants, not low-skilled migrant laborers. Therefore, the literature about TCK do not mention about assimilation at all. Never talk about relation between migrants and the host family, host country. They only talk about the issue of the migrants' identity crisis issues, right? By suggesting that TCK think they do not belong to their home country culture and host country culture, but composed of third culture. That's why they say third culture kid. So I found the literature is like separated into each other, the 1.5 generation literature and TCK. And the literature cannot, like, they are separated into each other, and it seems like there's no middle point between the literature. That's what I found. So, right, oh, I live here, right. Yeah, it passed. Right, so because it was hard to say that Korean youth who decided to remain in the Philippines even after the university graduation hope to assimilate into the Philippine mainstream society, Korean youth seem to be TCK. I say seem to be. So as mentioned, TCK literature often discussed that TCK have identity crisis issue because they thought they did not belong to any other culture, and such fluidity in their identity might also work as advantage for them to have confidence to live any place in the world. That's the summary of these current TCK literatures. Then, however, if the Korean youth, if Korean youth did not have intention to move around the world after graduation of Philippine University, and they decided to stay in the Philippines, can we say him or her TCK? Then, and then if we say him, 1.5 generation, what's the difference between those Korean youth in the Philippines from, let's say, 1.5 Korean youth in the United States? We don't know yet at all. And more importantly, if the Korean youth do not have intention to be assimilated into the Philippine mainstream society, what kind of society or culture they are making in this country? So for those Korean young people who are now in the Philippine University and have planned to leave this country after graduation to move around the world, there are also another questions coming up. We might call him or her TCK, but it only denotes the migrants' identity crisis. Thus, we don't know how those Korean youth interpreted their experience in the Philippines, how such experience changed their worldview, and how they make relation to the Philippines, Korea, and other parts of the world. And noted earlier, I am currently in the beginning stage of this new project, so I'm very afraid that my presentation doesn't have any concrete conclusion, but by sharing my journey of this research, I would like to listen to your precious opinion and suggestion. Plus, if you know any Korean who were graduated from Philippine University and extended their stay in the Philippines, please let me know. And through this research, I really like to explore what the future of Korean community in the Philippines, because those Korean youth will be the sort of next leader of Korean community in the Philippines. And because they spent at least 10 years, 15 years, and almost 12 years, 20 years already in the Philippines, and they were graduated here since elementary, even the university. So the Korean community might be very different from in the past. From now on, but we don't know yet what kind of the future of Korean community in the Philippines yet. So that's my overall research questions and what I want to find out in the end. So thank you for listening. Salamat po.
감사합니다. 감사합니다. Thank you so much. And earlier, I was rushing everything, so I forgot to acknowledge Dr. Ramon Santos because so sorry, because I was not sure because of face mask. But I'm so sorry, sir. But can we acknowledge Dr. Ramon Santos once again? Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for coming with us this morning. Dr. Kim just gave a very comprehensive and I think, like she mentioned, the study is ongoing. So maybe later on you have different questions and feedback. But first of all, we will have Dr. Michelle Balumbari from UP Asia Center, and also she's serving as a director of UPC Fund. So she can also share some insights with us. Michelle.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Dr. Kim. when you presented your research, actually, it reminded me of my stay in Korea. It felt really nostalgic because I stayed in Korea for about 10 years. And for the third question, really, is you wondered about the lives of these Koreans. And then it made me reflect upon my life, after leaving Korea for some time. Um, so it's a very interesting one. And I'd love to see a comparative study, if you will, later on. But no, I have questions later, but those are reserved later. For now, maybe you can come across with a study by Mira Lau. It's an old one. Yeah, in Visayas. I think it's in 2004. But the point of the study is that the Koreans came to the Philippines to settle. And Philippines is not a developed country. And they chose a developing country. And that's something that Mira Lau discovered in the study. Perhaps you can look into that. The other one is a study by SIPAL, by UP SIPAL Philippines, about just a summary of the Korean migrants in the Philippines. Yes, and there you can see that the many Koreans chose to settle in the Philippines, those who are retirees, really. And then when you show your presentation, I think about the students now. It's not more about the retirement, a place to retire, but a place for, how can I say, so for mobility, to enhance their academic credentials. So I can see the generational differences there. Just a suggestion, perhaps you can look into those materials. But as for your study, really, I just want to ask for some clarifications about the youth you mentioned. How do you really define the youth here? What's the age bracket? And then you mentioned about the choki yuha, early childhood education. Does it mean your respondents from kinder to college, or just from higher education, when they entered the university? So perhaps you need to clarify the term. And also, you mentioned about home, and then it reminded me of my stay in Korea. It's like my home too, for a decade. But how do you emphasize, really? How do you define home in your study? You mentioned about it as an emotional security, as an emotional attachment. It can vary, to different people. So perhaps this concept should be clarified for a better understanding of your study. Because the way I think it, when I stayed in Korea for some time, I also consider Korea, and especially the Yonsei part, around along that area. Every time I go to Korea, I always go to that place, in Sinchon, because I like the ajumonis there. There's a sense of emotional attachment as well, and familiarity. So those are just my comments for now, but I'll let if I have questions, some more questions later. But thank you. It's really interesting, and it feels really nostalgic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Okay. I think Mira Lau's paper, I don't think I've seen this one before, but so if you let me know the. Oh, sure. Thank you so much. Yes. I will definitely look for that. So the clarification of the term youth is really important. I really agree with that idea. And so now I'm thinking, right. I'm not sure if my research will use this term youth, but for the sort of categorizations for research participants, I'm recruiting the research participants by these definitions that they and at least the first priority is they need to be enrolled, or they need to study in the Philippine university or graduated Philippine university. That's the first criteria. Then the second criteria is that they were early study abroad students, and then extended their stay to finish the college study. That's my concept right now. So, but I'm still, I need to think about if I use the term youth, That's really good questions, because I also talk about the generational differences. So some of the older generation are not used anymore, maybe. So I really think about that terminology, right? Right. So, and the home, right? You're really, that's really good point, and very important point. So in that, the Korean article, I sort of tries to figure out what makes them feel home. So the sort of the right affect. So the sense of security and sense of familiarity. So I kind of categorize it in several sections. So I will again still will work on these issues again and again. So yeah, thank you so much for the comments.
You mentioned about the old people, not as youth. I
Right.
think they're also youth.
Oh.
They might be young at heart, you know.
Oh yeah, you're right. That terminology is really sometimes it's really problematic, right? So yeah, I will think about the issue really. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sabi ka, Dr. Kim, for your insightful presentation. I think I must have read one of your works, the one on Trade Warrior.
Oh.
Yeah. I'd like to ask, because you mentioned that you're adding the literature on emotions and affect in your research. And I wonder to what extent you probe in your interviews the ways in which Koreans, of course, these are just anecdotal stories that I've come across with from going to Korean salons, Korean restaurants, talking to Koreans. To what extent can you probe the fact that, some of them wish to stay here, not so much because they want to learn English or they want to work in global companies, but also because they feel that the Philippine society is less competitive. People are always smiling compared to the how do you call it, the suffocating
Right.
societal environment in Korea, where you always have to take a test.
Right.
And it's very hierarchical, and you mentioned it in terms of the university rankings, the hierarchy in economic class. But yeah, so it would be very interesting to me, because in the research that I've also done for KRC, one thing that the respondents came up with. Well, our respondents were marriage migrants who already stayed here in the Philippines with their Korean husbands. And one of the things that came out was that their husbands wanted to stay here in the Philippines, even if their Filipino wives want to go back to Korea, because here they can live the middle class life that they will never attain in Korea. And they also feel less constrained by the societal gaze, no?
Right.
Of competition, whether you made it or whether you're a failure or not. Yeah, that's the question. Thank you.
Right.
아니면
Yes, it's really good point, and I also wanted to touch that issues too. So the competition during the interview with my Korean the students, the competition is one of the words that came up most frequently. So they already acknowledge that as one of my research participants said that they also know that they can be no one in Korea because it's too competitive. So they don't know they feel like that they are not sort of capable of being competitive. So they said they were raised in this less competitive society, so they are not ready mentally to fight against each other. So that's what they think about the issue. So that's why they also at the same time they feel very insecure too. So they need to, at some point, if they think they need to leave this country at some point, they need to mentally ready to fight against each other, but they are not ready yet. So that's what makes them very insecure all the time. So, and partly because I interviewed them in Korea, not in the Philippines. That's also affected this interview, I guess, because it was during COVID-19. So all of interviewees were already out of the Philippines and they encountered the Korean society
Yeah.
in face,
Yeah.
face to face. So most of my research participants had a very hard time to be adjusted in the Korean society. Well, they've traveled to Korea so many times while they're in Philippines, but it was traveling. It was funny, fun experience in Korea. But when they really return to Korea for living, the scenarios might be very different. So they need to make money and they need to find some part-time job at least. So during that, because of that experience, they found out that, I'm not ready for this competitive society kind of thing. So some of them had a struggling, and so the reaction is very different from each other. So some of them, among the research participants, decided to quit the Philippine university and permanently return to Korea after by encountering the Korean society. So they said that I need to be ready as soon as possible. I cannot postpone anymore. So some of them reacted that way, and some of them reacted, I need to remigrate other countries, not in Korea, I cannot live here. So the reaction was different, but the competition was really, really important factors for them to make a decision after Philippines. Right.
Actually, this is supposed to be a question, but an affirmation of what Ma'am Jean already mentioned. I still do actually. I tutor Korean university students, so I can actually refer some participants for their study. But aside from, because I also asked them and their parents why they are sent here to study, and I have not really seen also at least in the reasons that you stated, aside from English and the at least cheaper option for sending them here to study. There are, at least in my mind now, out of the many, there are three particular parents who mentioned protecting your children's mental health. So I'm not sure if, that's very related to competition, because of competition. But they particularly were very concerned about high suicide rates in Korea, and they wanted to protect their children, so they'd rather choose a place where it's less competitive, it's more friendly, teachers are more patient, and more considerate. So so actually, it was supposed to be a question, but now a reaction connected comment also from Richard.
Do you want to respond first? Well,
Ma'am Monica.
Okay. Thanks for that. I was curious also because there was one time I had Korean students when I was still teaching in another university. And so there were two of them in the class. So they were explaining to me, for instance, how they would address each other. So as maybe it might be also interesting to look at them as not as a monolithic group, right? Because apparently there are social hierarchies, no? Even among themselves. So yun, no? I maybe that's also good. It'd be good to see how they also interact with each other.
right.
Maybe I was sort of building on maybe what you were saying, no? About the definition of youth. So this might, like, what kind of community do these students have with each other? Not just, of course, with their families, but I'd be curious, how they also interact with other students in the university, because they share maybe some experiences together. And anyway, what struck me was, how they would have assert even those hierarchies, not even when they're here in the Philippines. Of course, it's not. it's part of their socialization as Korean.
Right.
Anyway, that's it.
Oh, so, well, I will correct.
Yeah, we will get the questions first, and then Dr. Kim can respond. So.
Yes, this is Dr. Things, coming from an area science perspective, it's somewhat related to what, Monica has also mentioned. One thing that I noticed is that we sort of flattened both of your subjects, single monolithic entity of, Korea and single monolithic entity of the Philippines. Wherein, the interesting thing there is there are a lot of, geopolitical and socio-political imbalances that actually occur. Because one of the examples that you gave was a a Korean that was in Iloilo. And coming from Iloilo myself, like, one of the most difficult things has always been, can I survive as an Ilonggo in Manila? So so it's that type of nuances that you can also see where are people coming from, where did they go, and whether they've actually either because maybe some of these reactions that they had is not a Korean rejection, but rather it's the it's the space to which they actually stay.
Right.
It can also be like, as everyone in the room knows as well, there's a difference between Ateneo and UP, which means that these students also have a very different reaction or a different sense of self on themselves, right? So if you have that demographic data, it can actually make it much richer in terms of your analysis. Because and just as a final comment, you did mention about the Makati.
Yes.
So it's like the moment I saw that, I saw like, of course, because it's in Makati, right? If it was a UC, it's a very different thing as well. So it becomes a very richer concept. So just to sort of summarize my comment, it's that idea of whether you already trace these things, where they come from Korea, where did they go, where who they come from, what are their social geopolitical backgrounds, and so on, because it makes for a great analysis. Thanks.
I think I'll just suggest, perhaps there are organizations or student associations.
Yes.
Korean student associations from different regions, maybe far, right? So there might be some Korean Students Association in Iloilo, right? Korean Association students in Manila. You can compare and contrast your perceptions.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Geoffrey. I'm a professor in Korea. I was at UP, batch 95. So, matanda na po. I live in Korea for 23 years now. I have been living in Korea for 23 years. So, probably I can say that I have some insights, probably some. I know how Korean society is, how big the society is. I just want to know, or I would like to see whether is there any part in your study that talks about two aspects. I would say I would include the socio-economic aspect and the time element, because you talk about generations, you talk about state of youth in Korea. But before coming to the Philippines, or staying in the Philippines rather, before coming to the Philippines, what were the factors or the decision factors that made them decide to stay in the Philippines or to go to the Philippines? Because it has changed. You mentioned in your paper that I also have I am part of the two UPAAs in Korea. We have the Korean part, and we have the Filipino UPAA, UP Alumni Association. So those from the Koreans, they have PhDs in economics. They have most of them have PhDs. They work in research centers in Korea, so I know them. They see the Philippines or University of the Philippines at the time as someone or an institution with high reputation, such that. Now it's changed a lot. So now with these youth that the subjects of your study, what were the decision factor? Because for the many years that I have studied in Korea, I think most of you also have experience tutoring Koreans. If you ask them, the university or the country they want to study or they want to learn English, the Philippines is not number one. And then when you say the main reason why they come here is because of the cheap price, or because it's economical. Yes, it is, but the other aspect of that is, I think it's because it's more fun in the Philippines. They can drink what unlimited. We hear they share a lot of experiences, and so the social economic aspect, because the reputation is also very important. If you go to the Philippines to study undergraduate or bachelor's degree, then they come back to Korea. They will be compared to those students who studied in SPY and also from other countries, like such as Australia or the US. And was there any in your mentioned in your study that they felt discriminated or insecure, some insecurity in that aspect? Or would they continue to study master or PhD in the Philippines because probably bachelor's degree is not enough? And then, social economic, because once you present yourself as someone who graduated from UP, even if it's top university in the Philippines, and you have a competitor, there's another a Korean who studied in another country. I would also comment that probably the Philippines is only a stepping stone for to go to another country. So it's just like I don't know how to describe this. It's a bridge to their end goal of going to the US or Canada. So I think those are the things that I want to just mention. Just the generational gap on the perception of how they see the Philippines have changed. So I also want to know what the important aspects of the transition on how they have changed. You said that those who have studied in the Philippines 20 years ago are not youths anymore. But because you mentioned about that, it would be nice if you ask those youths on the transition, which part on their decision making that made them stay in Korea, or the decision to stay in the Philippines or come to the Philippines. I think those are the things that I want to see in your paper. So thank you. I don't know how to come up with a very clear explanation of what I wanted to point out, but there are two aspects: social economic aspects and the time element, because they are interrelated.
Right.
안녕하세요. So, as we know, from maybe reading the news or something, but most Korean males have to serve in the military due to their citizenship or obligation to the state. So, I wanted to ask if you think this has any impact also on having Korean students return back to Korea and staying there due to convenience, or they've already accustomed to Korean lifestyle. Also, I just wanted to reaffirm what Sir was mentioning a while ago, that the Philippines is used as a stepping stone, because I do know a lot of people from study here to avoid having to take the college entrance exams in Korea, because it's harder to get into Sky universities if you study secondary and higher education in Korea. But if you come from an international standpoint, maybe I think 10 or 12 years, you're no longer required to take the exam. So I just wanted to ask for your thoughts on these and their impacts on the yeah. on your team.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. That was really very fascinating. I think the study that you're doing on Korean students studying in not the usual countries, not the usual destinations. I think that's one of the emerging areas of study on international student mobility. But before I forget, maybe I'd just like to mention that in fact, one of the Philippine scholars, Sarah Domingo,
Oh, yes.
no, she did her study on Korean
Yes,
in India.
yes.
Yeah. And also maybe as a tip, because when I was still in UP in the 1990s, there was actually somebody who finished a PhD in anthropology.
Yes.
He was mentored by Dr. Kovar. So
Dr. Tong, right?
I cannot remember the
Oh.
name, but I know that he was good looking.
Yeah. Maybe different. But
전인가 봐요.
Yeah. But what I'd also like to reinforce is the point that you made about the time element. Because indeed, the youth category will be very problematic if it is considered within that time context when they were here in the Philippines, of course, when they were still young. But then there's already, time has passed, and they have actually gone through many transitions. And so maybe the youth part is when they were studying in the Philippines during that particular period, but then there's already the post-education experience in the Philippines, as well as their post-youth experiences wherever they are, whether they have remained here or have returned to Korea. So I guess what would also, maybe I forgot or I missed it, but it is, for those who have remained in the Philippines from their early study of law to this point in time, I think that's a very interesting part of the study that I have yet to see. Maybe some studies of early students abroad, really, in a sense, rather longitudinal, because then, this is a group of people who have remained here. And the point that you made at some point where some of the students actually negotiated with their parents to remain in the Philippines, I think that was very important, and for them to be able to assert their choice not in remaining in the Philippines. But for those who continue to remain in the Philippines, you would be asking, well, what are their intentions? It would also be very important to know the profile of those who remain in the Philippines. Are they married to locals? Are they married to Filipinos? Because that would pave a way for them to gain citizenship. And I guess in terms of, their stay in the Philippines, what is their status? Are they always renewing their, I suppose, residence permit? And it would be, you raise the question as to what would they be? Would they be considered 1.5 or PCK? But, given the context also of the Philippines as a destination, we don't really have policies here on how to integrate the migrants. We are used to thinking of ourselves as a country that people live in, as a country of origin, but not as a country of destination. And that's also something that we also have to acknowledge, that even if it's not a major country of destination, Koreans are settling here. They've been here for, as you say, 20 years, and actually for some even longer. So the question also of assimilation, as a policy, we don't have policies. So in a sense, from a state perspective, there is no model of integration happening. But also, it would be good to know from their perspective how they think of incorporating or integrating in the Philippines. Maybe it's not necessarily assimilation, because there are also models other than assimilation, could be called culturalism or something else. Because those models were sort of created in the context of traditional countries of destination. But the Philippines is not a traditional country of destinations. I think that would be very exciting things to incorporate. Other questions?
Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm definitely from political science. I actually also study research on migration in the context of West Asia. So from that perspective, we all know that the mobility of youth are still, of course, it's more pronounced in that region, but it's still contingent on their parents' mobility, as well as their parents' decisions. So I'm interested in asking, to what extent have you captured the degree of parental influence on the decisions of the children? For instance, you mentioned that they're early abroad students. So when I'm not familiar, but when they migrate to the Philippines, were they accompanied by their parents? Did their parents stay with them for quite a while, then leave them here when they were of a certain age, or did they hire, for instance, Filipino caretakers or whatnot? I believe that would influence, of course, their responses to your interview. So that would be definitely important. At the same time, when it comes to the third culture children, the third culture can literature versus 1.5 literature, because they've also done some amazing here. Yes, I agree with the appreciation of PCK literature is more so focuses on identity, and 1.5 more focuses more so on the nature of their migration, so whether they are born on what or what. So, and it's also important to assess the relative power of the receiving state and the sending state. So very positive, well, it's very positive terms, but or rather host country or home country in that case. So in the context of South Korea, in the Philippines, of course, it's also important to nuance that South Korea's state is definitely relatively more powerful. For instance, the international scheme. When it goes to the Philippines, the passport is more powerful, for instance. So that could also affect your decision whether the concept of 1.5 generation for TCK is applicable. Thank you. That's
Wow, so many questions. Okay, let me touch on one. Okay, so the questions and comments and really everything is really excellent. So it will really help me to think about this topic more and more. And first, when I actually mentioned the mental health, it's really really important issues, and high suicide rate is true. It is true, and especially among young female students. The women, the suicide rates is pretty high for the young women rather than the men. So there are many interpretations there, but for those who are interested in the Korean issues, contemporary Korean issues, the sort of gender issues are really, really hot in Korea these days. So, yes, sadly true. So as a scholars who teaches feminism in Korean university, because I'm from women's university, so sometimes I feel like I might be attacked in the street. I feel insecure sometimes. Anyway, so the suicide rate is really important, and the many students. I didn't interview parents yet, but I really believe the parents really mentions about the mental health issues too, and the Monica's and Car's comments is really important. Of course, the Korean young people's community is not single or monolithic, of course not. And so there are, I don't know if I say hierarchy, but they have different groups there. So particularly those who recent comers, sort of recent comers, they are not there. So the old comers and recent comers have different groups each other, and so it's like in any other migrant young groups, I guess, like in the United States too. Those Korean students who came to United States at early age, they have their circles already, and they sort of tries to differentiate those recent comers who don't speak English that much and who doesn't have any American friends. So they tries to differentiate. So I found kind of very similar phenomena in the Korean young people in the Philippines too. So those old comers, they tries to, some of them emphasize that I know how I know the Tagalog, and I have a lot of Filipino friends. I'm different from those arrogant Koreans, Those kind of differentiations were there too, distinctions there too. And also there's some the groupings are also based on some like religion too, I guess, because the Christian church is very powerful in the Philippines, Korean Christian church. Protestant church. So some of the students that I interviewed, they had a very strong circles among the church boards. So even the parents too. So in that cases, they have very like click to each other. That's what I found. And also there are some other distinctions there too, because among the recent comers, the Korean republics have some perceptions that those Korean young people who go to the Philippines are, some of them are like 양아치, which means like bastards. Those who fail go to the Korean university. That's why they chose the Philippine university. There's some public perceptions there too. So that also makes another distinctions among the Korean youth. I'm not the one who were failures, and so they tries to not to mingle those seemingly bastards, Korean young people. So there were some distinctions there too. But what I found also is that because of COVID-19, the Korean community sort of crashed, I think. So they were splitted each other, and many of them returned to Korea among the young people too. So yesterday's interview, I found out that the remaining young people, universities, Korean university students wants to rebuild the communities right now. So nowadays, I feel like they, I mean, compared to the 7 or 8 years ago, they tries to reconnect each other rather than make a distinction. That's what I found yesterday's interview, because the number was very reduced these days. So they want to make a connection these days. That's what I found yesterday. From the Car's comment, it's really also, I really believe the what kind of where they come from the Philippines is really important. I really agree with that ideas. And I also noticed that from yesterday interviews, I got some insights that well, I understand if they're from Iloilo or BGC, it's very different, of course. But the thing is that most of my interviewees, the Korean young people, are, as you might know, they are live together. I mean, like they are living in a gated community wherever they live in, and so they are from private school or international school. None of them from public schools. So their experiences are sort of limited in some sense. So, but interesting thing is that but once they get into the university, they finally meet sort of real Filipinos from public school, from regions, from Iloilo, for instance. So even if they were from Iloilo, they were from gated communities, so they were from international school. So it's hard to meet sort of another Filipino, I mean, real Filipino society. So, but after getting into the university, they finally meet someone else. Okay, this is Philippine. Like they kind of recognize something else. So I think that was really important. I guess I don't know how to write down in the paper yet, but yesterday I found it really, really important for them to realize where they live in. So that's what university education means for them. That's what I found. So I will tackle on that issue more and more. And most of Koreans that I interviewed were from one of these reasons, actually. I mean, for instance, for your reference, like Alabang, BF Homes, when they are from Manila, and some of them from BGC, and those are very like limited geographical options, I guess, most of them. So their experiences are sort of not same, but kind of similar in some sense. But the university is provided very different cultural experiences for them. And oh, right. For Michelle's questions, right, the reasons for them to come to the Philippines, I think her question and right, Geoffrey's questions are connected, I guess. So the economic factor is really important, of course, right? The interesting thing is that not all, but the many of Koreans who chose to come to the Philippines, not only for the children's educations, but for business, for instance, are not from Gangnam area. I mean the richest place in Korea. So most of them were from outside Seoul or suburban Seoul. So not all, but I cannot say they are from like upper class people. There are mostly middle or lower middle class, I guess. So that's what also shape their decision making process, I guess. And it's kind of so for instance, some of the students who it's also connected to I forgot his name, but the family background, right? Parents' decision, right? So it depends on what parents do or what parents do in Korea and the Philippines, I guess. So some of the Korean parents, they came with the children to the Philippines, but some of them just send their children by themselves. So it depends on the parents' decisions, and when they parents decided to send their children to go to the Philippines, many of my research participants were very young, like 5 years old or 10 years old, so they don't remember why they were here. But they just remember when their parents ask, "Are you enjoying life here?" And they say yes. So they extended their stay. That's what they remembered. And in case their parents came here together, they don't remember why their parents decided to come. So that's the weak point of my research, because I didn't interview the parents part. So I cannot figure out why they originally came to the Philippines. It's really hard to figure out, but based on what children remembers, it's different by family. And in the case the parents, usually father, do the business, their business wasn't that like sort of large ones, powerful ones, mostly like hair shops or restaurants, like small businesses they are running. And so that's why I think I cannot say they are from upper class from Korea, I guess. And also, right, about the going back to Geoffrey's question about the discrimination when they return Korea, it's really important issues. It's also related to the Korean men. Maybe are you Korean, right? Can I say okay? So his question too about the military, it's connected each other because, as I told you, when they returned to Korea during the COVID-19, they encountered the Korean society, and some of Korean men decided to go to the military because it's COVID-19, they cannot go anywhere. So why not? I'm going to the military. That's why some of my research participants decided to go to serve the military. And that experience really changed their world perception totally. That was really important. I mean, very interesting point, because not only the military, but when they encounter the Korean society, they finally figure out, oh, I got discriminated in some sense. Particularly when they go to the military, they meet. Some of them goes to the sort of special unit for English speakers. I don't know the military terms, but like special forces for those young men who's raised outside Korea. there is some categorizations. So some of them decided to go to that military units or to some interpreter, serve as an interpreter, English interpreter. That's where they meet those Korean students who studied in the United States or United Kingdom, those Western countries. And then they realize that the people's Koreans treatment are different. That's where they figure out. So some of the Korean men, after the military service, that's why they quit the Philippine university and tries to re-migrate to other countries or re-enter the university in Korea. But not all of their reactions are the same, of course not. And also one of the interviewees yesterday, he also changed his worldview after the military service, but his reaction was different. So he decided, but because his Tagalog was excellent too. So he decided not to return to Korea after the military, come back to the Philippines, and after graduation, he decided to remain in the Philippines too by doing his own business. And because he thought that way, I'm not a sort of, I cannot be extraordinary Korean in Korea. But I can be some extraordinary Korean here in Manila because he can speak Korean, English, and Tagalog. So why not? I will be here. So that's why he decided to remain in the Philippines after the military. So the reaction was different, but the military service and their experiences of discrimination changed their life plan a lot. That's what I found. So that's why also that's connected to other questions that they continue to find way out. So some of a stepping stone, right? So that's why some of them tries to use these experiences in the Philippines as stepping stone to move another countries, particularly Singapore. They prefer Singapore. I think that's because Singapore is also Asian countries. It's not far from Korea, and they speak English there too, and Chinese. They can learn Chinese, and that's why they think that Singapore is one of the best options. So I interviewed some of Koreans who, after graduation, one had a master's degree in United Kingdom, and one re-entered the university in Singapore. There are some two other cases I remember. So in that cases, they definitely use the Philippines as a sort of stepping stone or anchor to move around the countries. And the thing is that the interesting thing is that most of those Korean youth are very confident to move around the world. And so they believe that's confidence, or the sense of confidence is one of the important assets for them to have in the Philippines. All of my research participants said that way. And also Sarah, yes, I know her. And I'm so happy that she's also working on these issues too. And I think she and I check on each other's papers. Right, so I really wish to work with her in the future. And longitudinal study, definitely, I'm really wants to, because the research participants that I interviewed and that I'm interviewing are mostly 20-something. They are very still young. And now they are very confident to move around the world. You know, they don't think about marriage, and I don't care about family. They are very free, but I don't think they will stay that way forever. No, I don't think so. So I really want to trace their life 5 years, in 5 years or in 10 years, and where they really settle down or where they live. I don't know really. So I really, if I tries to deepen this research question, I really think that I need this longitudinal study about the students, right? What else? Oh yes, right, about the assimilation, right? The Philippines, I know the Jason from Ateneo. Oh, yes, Lasai, all right, Lasai. So he's working on the multiculturalism in the Philippines, right? So he also has that similar argument that the Philippines does not have sort of integration models yet, because the Philippines believe they are sending migrants, sending country, right? So I also want to talk about this issue to meet my ethnographic data in the future, because as I forgot the mom's name, but Amalin mentions that the 1.5 or second generation theory that were mostly developed in the Western countries might not be applied for those Korean young people in the Philippines. So we can develop something else for the Philippines and for Koreans too. So I hope that, I don't know when, but I hope I can suggest something else. Okay. Thank you so much.